Hello there, everybody. We are here tonight to talk about one of the biggest problems for people with migraines, which is what the heck am I supposed to eat? There are so many different food triggers, migraine diets out there. I think you could spend, a lifetime just trying to figure out what to eat if you have migraines in order to make them better, sorting through all of the different options and the trial and error.
My mother suffered from migraines for my entire childhood memories until we literally changed her diet was a big part of it. And now she doesn't have migraines now for, I'm gonna say 20 years or something like that. So
Wow.
big
That,
change.
that's an incredible recovery. I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear more about the link between how different kinds of foods can trigger our immune system. And this is such a big issue for people with migraine because it contributes to that chronic inflammation under the surface. And I think people get very confused about like, is the food the problem? Is the immune reaction the problem?
This is what really changed my life and has changed my clients' life. It's so many of them because
Okay.
inflammation doesn't just come spontaneously. It really needs to be triggered by something. And first was an environmental trigger. And this, like with celiacs, that environmental trigger is gluten. And if they have gluten, then they get very sick. But if they stay away from gluten, they live a pretty normal life. So that is really, I think, one of the most important things to think about when you're thinking about inflammation and how inflammation relates to migraines, because we know migraines have an inflammation component to them, is
Mhm.
that it's not coming out of nowhere. There is something that is triggering that inflammation in your body.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying it's actually both. It's the food, but it's also how your body responds to it. That same food might not cause problems for everybody, or maybe like all sorts of different foods could cause problems if you're. So tell me, is there a way to check for that inflammatory response? I mean, I do food sensitivity testing. It's very, simple, straightforward, but I know you have a way to take that to the nth degree.
The best, really gold standard of food sensitivity testing that is out there is called the MRT, the mediator release test. This test is only offered by one lab in the entire country,
Wow.
and it is really accurate and reproducible, like over 92% accuracy, and I think over 94% reproducibility, which is really high rates in the world of lab testing.
Mhm.
It tests 176 foods and chemicals that are in our food supply, things like sulfates and nitrates
Mm.
and other things that are added, sorbates that are added to our regular foods all the time that we might not think that they're bad because we see them all the time on labels. If we're reading labels, which we should absolutely be reading labels.
Mhm.
Um, and then when the results come back, every single item that is tested is annotated as to how reactive, how many histamine, cytokines, chemokines, other inflammatory mediators are released upon exposure to that food. So it's not looking for antibodies at all. It's looking for the actual substances that your blood cells release that trigger the inflammatory response and that cause inflammation in the body. If you remember that all symptoms pretty much have inflammation underneath them. That's what's causing that pain, that discomfort, that dysfunction. So, if we get rid of the inflammation by looking at the foods, not that are on the top of this chart that say, oh, A, B, and C are the most reactive foods, you should just avoid them. Well, then what are you supposed to replace them? Maybe you're replacing them with something that's little less inflammatory, but still inflammatory for you. So we're going to look at the chart and we're going to say, okay, let's focus on X, Y, and Z. These foods that we can see are not reactive for you, that these are really safe, not anti-inflammatory. They're not going to take away inflammation, but they're not going to cause any new inflammation in your body. And if we can design a diet for you, which is called officially the LEAP dietary therapy, LEAP, lifestyle, eating, and performance, then we can bring your body to a place where you're not feeding this inflammatory response all the time. And it allows your body to literally deflate. It's crazy. People lose, they find their rings are loose. Men find that they have to go down a jacket size sometimes. I mean, really things sometimes that you don't realize were even inflamed because it's just kind of how you've been used to living.
Hmm. So I want to really break this down for people because the words inflammation and immune system are similar and they're linked, but they're different. And these two tests that we're talking about here illustrate this so well. Okay, so your immune system is basically made of cells, okay? It's little cells inside. And one of the things those cells do is they release antibodies, okay? So like, let's say, you've got a bunch of things inside here. Okay, this is an antibody floating around that's been released by this cell. The most common types of food sensitivity testing, they're checking the little antibody. So what we know about that is that if you have leaky gut, you have intestinal permeability, meaning stuff inside your gut is getting into your immune system and it shouldn't be. Like you wouldn't react to it if your gut was totally healthy. Then when you're making these antibodies, that is a sign of that. So it's not necessarily a sign that you are sensitive to all those foods. It just means your bloodstream is seeing this stuff. You're making this antibody. What you're talking about is a completely different thing. So once these cells come in and make the antibodies, they also make a bunch of liquid. And that liquid is what we call inflammation, basically. And those are things called cytokines and interleukins, for those of you who are in the field and know the lingo. But it's really that. That's why people say when you lose inflammation, you lose weight, you're losing water weight, you're losing those inflammatory chemicals. And so the test you're talking about is so different because you're looking at that inflammatory reaction. You're not looking at just the antibodies that can be there even if you just have leaky gut. You're looking at, okay, we're going to put some of this food directly on your blood. Let's see what your blood does. Does your blood react to it? And that, I think, is a pretty good marker of food sensitivity. It seems like it's more accurate.
I really think it is. And I love how you just explained it. In fact, I may steal that from you at some point because that was
Absolutely, feel free.
really, really digestible. But let's not forget, like the most famous mediator that we've all heard of is histamine, right? We've heard of
True.
histamine.
Yeah.
We've heard of an anti-histamine diet or low histamine diet, all those things. I had a client today who was asking me, she said, should I follow these MRT results or should I adopt a low histamine diet based on somebody's list of high histamine foods or something? And I said, this test is testing to see whether each particular food releases histamine in your body, causes your body to release histamine. You don't have to follow some generic list that somebody else made up, which is very restrictive if you're trying to follow a low histamine
Yeah.
diet. There's a lot of things they don't want you to eat, which really is very, very limiting in ways you might not have to be. And
Yeah.
for her, particularly, because one of the things on this low histamine list that she saw was avocados. Yet,
I
when we
know.
did her MRT test, we found avocados were like zero, causing no inflammation in her body. There's no reason she needs to take those out of her life.
I'm sure she was so happy because like
She
Mexican
was,
food is back now. I mean, that's just good news.
yes.
Dr. Yarnell, absolute pleasure to have you here this evening. I appreciate you so much for sharing your expertise with us around these issues of food sensitivities and that I think are so difficult for people with migraines and opening our eyes to a few things that we probably have not thought about before. Most of us haven't. So thank you so much.